My sister locked eyes with me across the table. The restaurant buzzed with quiet conversations and clinking glasses, but her words sliced through everything. "You'll never be successful," she said flatly. "You're a single mom with nothing." Her husband didn't miss a beat. He let out a short, dry laugh and added, "Exactly. Broken and used." I felt the words hit like a slap, but I didn't react. I didn't argue. I didn't flinch. I just sat there, keeping my hands folded in my lap, biting the inside of my cheek so I wouldn't say something I couldn't take back. My heart raced, but I held my breath. This wasn't the first time they tried to make me feel small, but something felt different tonight. I wasn't who they thought I was anymore. The air grew thick with their smug satisfaction. Ginevra leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine like a queen holding court. Trent kept grinning, proud of his little jab, like he'd just nailed the punchline of some cruel joke. I stayed quiet. Then, out of nowhere, a waiter approached our table. He was holding a bottle of wine. One I didn't recognize, clearly expensive. He stepped to our side and placed it gently on the table, label facing outward. "Compliments of the owner," he said, his voice smooth, his eyes kind. "She wanted to thank you for dining with us this evening." Ginevra looked confused. She blinked, then scoffed lightly, unsure whether to be flattered or suspicious. Trent raised an eyebrow, amused. "We don't know the owner," she said dismissively, looking around the restaurant like she was expecting a stranger to wave at her from another table. The waiter didn't flinch. He turned his gaze toward me, then back to them. "Actually, you do," he said. "She's sitting right there." He pointed at me. Everything stopped. I could hear the music again, faint in the background. The room seemed to slow down, their faces twisted in confusion before freezing in disbelief. Ginevra's jaw clenched. Trent leaned forward as if he'd misheard. I smiled. Small, but certain, and in that moment the silence screamed louder than anything they had said all night. I didn't always know how to hold my head high. There was a time not long ago when shame felt heavier than anything I carried in my arms, even heavier than my son when he was a newborn and I hadn't slept in 3 nights. That version of me would have never walked into that restaurant, let alone sat across from my sister and her husband like I belonged at their table. But the woman I am now, she's earned her seat. My name is Sierra Miles. I'm 32 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Dallas with my 7-year-old son, Micah, and I am a single mother. Micah came into my life when everything else was falling apart. His father left the moment I told him I was pregnant, said he wasn't cut out for responsibility. I was 24, scared, jobless, and humiliated. I moved back in with our mother, who loved Micah more than she knew how to show, and I started working nights at a diner. I cleaned offices early in the morning before Micah woke up. I did hair from my kitchen for neighbors, anything legal that kept the lights on. My sister Ginevra, or Jen, as she insists people call her, was always the one who had it together. She married Trent when she was 28. He came from money and made more of it in real estate. Jen became the polished woman she always wanted to be. Tailored blazers, expensive highlights, always with something to criticize. She loved to remind people she pulled herself up, even though we came from the same place. Our mom scrubbed motel toilets so we could have Christmas presents. Jen just left and never looked back. The few times we saw each other after I had Micah, the conversations felt like interviews I hadn't prepared for. She'd tilt her head and say things like, "So, what are you doing with yourself these days?" And before I could answer, she'd be talking about Trent's latest investment property or her spa weekends in Scottsdale. Still, she always extended an invite around the holidays or family birthdays, probably to keep up appearances. Most of the time, I declined. I couldn't afford to sit at tables where I was being judged the second I sat down. But something shifted a year ago. One night, after putting Micah to bed, I was scrolling through social media, drowning in comparison, and I saw someone selling handmade baby slings out of their apartment, and they were thriving. That moment hit me hard. I had ideas. I had taste. I just didn't have belief. So I started with $20, bought some scrap fabric, and borrowed a sewing machine. I worked while Micah napped or watched cartoons. I posted my designs on Instagram, tagged moms I admired, sent out samples to influencers. Slowly, I started getting orders. Then, repeat customers. I built a website. I learned how to do shipping labels. I created a brand. I named it Miles Ahead, a play on my last name, and the idea that we weren't just surviving, we were moving forward. For 6 months, I barely slept, but the orders kept coming. I didn't make a lot of noise about it, especially not to Jen. She would have rolled her eyes and said something like, "That's cute," and gone back to bragging about her country club's new chef. But inside, I was changing. I was growing. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, in the best way. That's when the invitation came. Jen texted me out of nowhere. Dinner on Saturday. Trent made reservations. Come catch up with us for once. No emojis, no warmth. Just an expectation. Part of me wanted to say no, like I always did, but I didn't. I stared at that message for a long time and typed one word: sure. Because this time, I wasn't walking in as the single mom with nothing. I was walking in as a business owner, a woman who built something from scratch, a woman who knew what it meant to carry weight and not collapse. And whether Jen liked it or not, I was going to sit at her table. Not to prove anything, but to remind myself I could. The restaurant Jen chose wasn't just expensive. It was designed to remind you that you didn't belong unless you made 6 figures and smelled like imported leather. I walked in wearing a soft beige dress I'd made myself and heels I hadn't worn since my baby shower. I held my shoulders back, head high, but my stomach turned the moment I spotted them. Jen and Trent were already seated near the back, in a private section just secluded enough to feel exclusive. She looked flawless, as always. Sleek bun, a white blazer, and the kind of jewelry you don't buy without someone's last name behind your bank account. Trent was in a gray tailored suit, more tan than he was last month, probably back from another trip. They barely noticed me approaching until I pulled out the chair across from them. "You look comfortable," Jen said as her eyes skimmed me up and down. Trent chuckled. "Didn't expect you to show. Thought maybe you were busy with crafts." I gave a small smile, refusing to take the bait. "Good to see you too." The waiter came by and they didn't ask if I wanted anything. Trent ordered for both of them, steak rare, sea bass, truffle risotto. I ordered a sparkling water and declined the appetizers. I had no appetite for small talk laced with insults. They started talking about their new lake house. Trent described the heated floors in the bathroom like he had invented the concept. Jen went on about a networking gala in Houston, casually mentioning how people of a certain class tend to stick together. I nodded politely. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to hear the answers. "You still doing your little website?" Jen asked eventually, swirling her wine. "It's going well," I said. She laughed. Not loudly, but enough to let me know she wasn't taking me seriously. "Well is such a flexible word, isn't it?" Trent leaned back in his chair and looked at me like he was analyzing a problem that had already solved itself. "You know, Sierra, some people just aren't built for success," he said. "It's nothing to be ashamed of. The world needs people who stay in their lane." Jen jumped in. "It's just, you had potential once, but you had a baby, no support system, no degree. You've made peace with that, right?" I stared at them for a moment, unsure which part of me they were trying hardest to erase. The mother, the woman, or the fighter. "You act like Micah ruined my life," I said calmly. "He saved it." Jen rolled her eyes. "That's sweet, but love doesn't pay bills, and passion doesn't build equity." Trent raised his glass. "Exactly, she's broken and used, but she keeps trying. You've got to admire that." There it was, the line meant to break me. The one he probably rehearsed on the drive over. I didn't speak. I sat in silence while the words burned across my skin like acid. But I didn't show it. My hands stayed steady on the table. My face didn't move. I glanced at my phone. Micah had sent a voice message an hour ago. "I love you, Mommy. Don't forget to smile at dinner." I listened to it twice before walking in. I held on to that. I held on to the long nights at my sewing machine. The months I spent building my brand while juggling school pickups, late payments, and skipped meals. I thought about the investors who had just signed off on my expansion. The business partner who believed in me when no one else did. The very restaurant we were sitting in. They had no idea. I felt that same flicker of shame try to rise, the one that used to silence me in rooms like this. But I didn't let it. Not this time. I didn't need to defend myself. I didn't owe them my story. I just needed to wait. Because this night wasn't over. And I wasn't leaving the way I came in. I sat there watching them toast each other with crystal glasses, sipping wine they didn't even taste, smiling at each other like they had just solved something. In their minds, the problem was me. They believed I had failed by default, that being a single mother was the proof of it, that I hadn't built anything worth noticing because I hadn't built it their way. But I wasn't here to beg for their respect. I wasn't here to defend my life to people who had never stepped inside it. I had come because I was tired of hiding. Jen turned her attention back to me as the waiter brought out their first course. She looked at me like she was squinting through glass, trying to get a better look at something small and unimpressive. Seriously, though, what's the end goal with your shop? She asked. Like, is it just something to keep you busy while Micah's in school, or are you actually trying to turn it into a business? I took a breath and met her stare. It already is a business. She smiled like I had just told her I'd started selling lemonade. Right. I meant a real one. I kept my face calm. I reminded myself I didn't need her to understand. I didn't need Trent's approval or Jen's validation. Their world had rules, but so did mine. And in my world, resilience was currency, and I had earned every dollar. What they didn't know, what they had no idea about, was that 3 weeks ago, I signed paperwork making me a co-owner of the very restaurant we were sitting in. It started when one of the restaurant's silent investors, a woman named Naomi, I met through a pop-up market, noticed how I managed my online brand. She came to me with an offer: help revamp the restaurant's identity, menus, marketing, merchandise, and she'd offer me equity and long-term partnership. At first, I thought it was a scam, but the paperwork was real, the meetings were real, and the money was real. She believed in me when all I had was a vision and a laptop that overheated every time I ran Photoshop. Since then, I'd been working with the restaurant team behind the scenes. I designed their new wine labels. I wrote their social media content. I helped coordinate their rebranding launch next quarter. And I signed my name beside Naomi's on the partnership agreement. Tonight was my first time dining here as a guest. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't want to waste the moment by trying to explain it to people who would never get it. I didn't need to defend my success. I just needed to live in it. So I sat quietly while they talked. I didn't interrupt. I didn't retaliate. I didn't match their energy. I simply waited. And when the waiter appeared at the edge of the table with a dark green bottle cradled in both hands, I knew my moment had arrived. He placed the wine on the table gently. "Compliments of the owner," he said with a calm smile. "She wanted to thank you for dining with us tonight." Jen looked up, confused. "We don't know the owner," she said with a laugh like the idea was ridiculous. Trent leaned in, trying to catch the label. "Is this a mistake?" The waiter turned toward me, his smile steady. "Actually, you do. She's sitting right there." He nodded at me. Jen's eyes darted to my face. Trent's grin disappeared. I didn't say a word. I reached for the glass the waiter had just set down and poured a splash of wine. I raised it slowly and took a sip. Their silence told me everything I needed to know. The balance had shifted. The power they thought they had, the image they had of me, the small, tired version of Sierra they kept in their minds, it was gone. Replaced by someone they hadn't seen coming, someone who had rebuilt her life one brick at a time without asking for their help, without needing their praise. And I hadn't even said a word. The decision I made to show up tonight wasn't about confronting them. It was about showing myself who I'd become. I didn't need to fight. I didn't need to yell. I just had to be seen. And in that moment, for the first time, they really saw me. For a moment, no one moved. Jen's fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass, but she didn't lift it. Trent leaned back slightly, his lips parted like he was about to say something, but nothing came out. The waiter was already walking away, calm and professional, like he hadn't just flipped the entire dynamic of the evening with a single sentence. I didn't rush to explain. I let the silence stretch, not to punish them, to protect the weight of the moment. I had spent so many years being the one who shrank to make others comfortable. Not anymore. Trent finally spoke. "What is this? A joke?" I turned to him without blinking. "No joke, I'm a partner here." Jen's head tilted. She laughed once, sharp and hollow. "You? This restaurant? Are you seriously trying to say you own part of this place?" "I don't try," I said. "I do." Their disbelief hung in the air like smoke. Jen blinked rapidly, her mouth opening and closing while her brain tried to reorder the story she had always told herself about me. "This is a high-end place," Trent said. "You're telling me you somehow managed to become a co-owner without anyone knowing? That's not how this works." "It is when you work hard, stay quiet, and focus," I said. "I've been working with Naomi Reyes for 6 months. I've been building branding, marketing strategy, and product placement behind the scenes. She offered me equity, and I earned it." Trent sat back in his chair and gave a low whistle. "So what? You just kept this to yourself, waiting for the perfect moment to show off?" "No," I said. "I didn't come here to show off. I came because you invited me. I stayed because I have every right to." Jen's face had gone still. Her confidence cracked, not loudly, but with that same subtle pressure a frozen branch feels before it breaks. She set her wine glass down and looked straight at me. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked. I let the question settle. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wanted to say it clearly. Because you never asked to understand my life. You only ever looked for ways to diminish it. You never wanted a real update. You wanted proof I was still struggling, that I was still behind you. That way, you could feel ahead. Jen's shoulders dropped an inch. She looked down for the first time that evening. She didn't argue. She didn't fire back. There was nothing left to say. I reached into my bag and pulled out 2 small boxes, simple, cleanly wrapped with black satin ribbons. I placed one in front of each of them. "What is this?" Trent asked, eyeing his box with caution. "Gifts," I said. "You're family. Whether you respect me or not, I'm still going to treat you with the same grace I give to anyone who walks through the door of my business." They opened them slowly. Inside each box was a custom candle from my brand, wrapped with a tag that read, "Miles Ahead, Handcrafted Strength." I watched Jen trace the label with her finger. She didn't say anything. "You built this?" she asked quietly. "I did," I said. "While you were busy counting my losses, I was building something worth owning. And I didn't do it to prove you wrong. I did it because Micah deserves to grow up watching his mother lead, and I deserve to live a life I'm proud of." Trent stood up, awkward now, unsure of his place in a room he no longer controlled. He muttered something about the valet and walked off, the box still in his hand. Jen looked up at me with something I hadn't seen in years. Not pity, not condescension, respect. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't need you to," I replied. I stood, smoothed my dress, and picked up my phone. Micah's name was on the screen. He texted, "Did you smile at dinner?" I typed back, "Biggest smile yet." As I walked toward the door, I didn't look back. I didn't need applause. I didn't need closure. I had given them the truth, and I had walked through the fire without burning. The little sister they once underestimated had become a woman they never saw coming. The night air hit my face as I stepped outside the restaurant. It was cool, calm, and quiet, so different from the energy I'd just left behind. The tension, the smugness, the assumptions they walked in with all stayed behind those polished glass doors. I took a deep breath and let it all go. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching people walk by, none of them knowing what had just happened inside. That made it feel even more powerful. I didn't need an audience. I didn't need approval. I needed peace. And for the first time in years, I had it. I opened my phone and tapped on Micah's name. He answered on the second ring, voice soft with sleep but still bright. "Mommy," he said, "did you eat cake?" "Not tonight, baby," I said, smiling, "but I had a very good dinner." "Did you wear the dress I picked?" "I did." He let out a little cheer. "I knew it would look nice on you." "You've got good taste." We talked for a minute before I told him to sleep tight and that I'd be home soon. After I hung up, I sat on a nearby bench and just let the silence settle in. That night could have gone differently. A year ago, it would have. Back then, I would have come home crushed, carrying every word they said like a weight I couldn't put down. I would have replayed their laughter, their smug glances, their dismissive tone. I would have felt like I wasn't doing enough, like I was still behind, still failing. But tonight reminded me how far I've come. When you grow up being the quiet one, the one who keeps the peace, you learn how to disappear. You make yourself small so others can feel big. You learn not to take up space. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You let people call you weak because proving them wrong takes energy you don't have. But somewhere along the line, I stopped shrinking. I stopped apologizing for being different. I stopped hiding my ambition behind survival. I realized I didn't have to be loud to be strong. I just had to be steady, consistent, clear. Jen and Trent saw what they wanted to see, a single mother with a tired face and quiet answers. They didn't see the woman who stayed up until 3 a.m. fulfilling orders, the woman who studied branding and marketing on YouTube while folding laundry, the woman who asked for no shortcuts, no handouts, and built something that made people feel seen. They saw broken. I became whole. I've learned that people will always try to define you by your weakest moment. They'll hold your past like a weapon and remind you of every misstep. But your past is not a prison. It's a platform. It's the foundation for what comes next. Being a single mother is not a limitation. It's a badge of honor. It means I do the work of 2 people and still find the strength to dream. It means I show up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And that strength doesn't need permission to shine. As I stood to leave, I thought about what I would tell Micah when he's older. I'll tell him that his mother didn't get her power from revenge or attention. She got it by refusing to give up, by knowing her worth even when others didn't, by planting seeds no one else believed in and watching them bloom anyway. That night was not about making Jen or Trent feel small. It was about no longer making myself feel smaller. It was about reclaiming the space they tried to steal and doing it with grace. Before I got in the car, I looked back at the restaurant one last time. I wasn't the girl who used to walk past places like this and feel like I didn't belong. I was part of it now. I helped build it. And I'm not done building. To anyone who's ever been called broken, used, or less than, let them talk. Let them doubt. You don't owe them a reaction. You owe yourself a future. And when the moment comes to take your seat at the table, take it. Not to prove you're worthy, but because you've always been. So if you're watching this and you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told you'd never make it, remember this. You don't need their approval to build a beautiful life. You don't have to prove your worth to people who never cared to see it in the first place. You just have to keep going, quietly, boldly, on your terms. Because when your moment comes, it won't be about revenge. It'll be about reflection. You'll realize you were never behind. You were just busy building. If this story spoke to you, like the video and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their strength. Drop a comment below and tell me what you're building, surviving, or dreaming of. I read everyone. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true stories about resilience, growth, and unexpected triumphs. Your voice matters, your journey matters, and you're never as alone as you think you are. Thanks for watching. Keep going.